Hello and welcome to the Gamers Tavern. I know, we're off schedule again, but this episode was recorded back in December and we're almost done with our backlog. And this week we have a pair of legends when it comes to gaming humor to join us to talk about gaming humor. First off, we have Scott Kurtz from PvP, Table Titans, and Acquisitions Incorporated. And around the hour mark, we have joining us John Kovalik from Munchkin, Apples to Apples, and so much more. And just to warn you, John had a few technical issues, so his sound's a little bit wonky. But before we get started, I've got a few updates to talk about. First up, if you didn't know, Gamers Tavern has a Twitch channel over at twitch.tv/Gamers Tavern Show. And we're still getting our scheduling worked out, but the current plans are for our new Shadowrun game table episodes run by Brandon Gensimer to air on Fridays, a tutorial on how to play Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition for complete beginners on Saturdays, an actual play of Dungeons & Dragons with the starter set on Sundays, and myself, our social media coordinator, Lauren, game designer, Michael Sherbrooke, as well as D20 Girls Louisiana coordinator, Andrea, playing Borderlands 2. We've also amped up our presence on YouTube at youtube.com/meetinatavern with archives of all the streams we've done so far. We've also redesigned our website. We've got new menus for easier navigations. We've got forums for you to interact with other fans of the show and a whole lot more. You can find that at gamerstavern.org. And one thing that's been taking up a lot of my time right now, and I don't have a lot of free time, but I've been watching the Geek and Sundry and their role-playing game stream on Thursdays called Critical Role, R-O-L-E. Watching these voice actors playing D&D really inspired a lot of people to want to start playing D&D, so that's why I started doing the live streams. I also took it upon myself to create Team Demihuman. Don't ask about the name, it's an in-joke. But it's an organized play online for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we have been approved by Wizards of the Coast to be part of Adventure League and Expeditions. So if you're looking for someone to play a game with online, or if you want to run a game for new or returning players, head to our forums and sign up at gamerstavern.org. With that said, grab a drink from the bar and take a seat at the table in the corner, and we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor, Easy Roller Dice. Because, come on, who doesn't need more dice? EasyRollerDice.com can satisfy even the most avarice craving for dice on the most modest budgets. Need dice of a certain color? They've got them. Want a gorgeous satin-lined dice bag? They've got them. Do you want to get over 100 dice for under $25? They've got them. And it doesn't stop there. Use the coupon code GAMER and get an extra 10% off their already amazing prices. Want to take advantage of this amazing offer? Just go to EasyRollerDice.com and use the code GAMER and finally sate the monster inside you demanding more dice.
The Gamers Tavern podcast is sponsored by Pinnacle Entertainment Group's Savage Worlds game, featuring Deadlands, 50 Fathoms, East Texas University, Weird Wars, and dozens of fantastic licensees. Savage Worlds is fast, furious, and fun. Hello and welcome to the Gamers Tavern podcast. I'm your host, Ross Watson.
And I'm Daryl Mott Jr.
And tonight we have with us a esteemed guest, webcomic creator, games commentator, and master of many other things related to both gaming and comics, Scott Kurtz.
Hello.
Hi, that's Scott. Great. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very, very nice intro. Very kind. Very flattering.
Well, I got to say, I am an enormous fan of your work.
Thank you.
I have been reading PvP for 13 years.
Yes, I know. It's getting up there. It's been 16.
Scott's been actually monitoring my web use, and he knows exactly which comics I've been looking at.
It's getting to the strip's getting to an age where people can tell me they've been reading for more than a decade and a half. and it's just frightening.
I've been reading your comic for an entire teenager.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Since the black and white days.
Yeah. Back when webcomics were in black and white.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was kind of the dawn of that particular period. And your comic, what really set it apart, aside from the artwork and the humor, was that it had a slant towards gaming. And specifically, the characters actually enjoyed tabletop as well as the video game.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem that I had early on was all of my video game strips were very pandering. I didn't play that many video games. I wasn't someone who bought every new game when it came out. So there's no way for me to keep up with that stuff. So there's a lot of comic strips in the first 2 or 3 years where I'm writing about games I'm not playing, and it wasn't very fun. So I broke away from that pretty quickly once I got my sea legs with the strip. But yeah, we've always talked about tabletop gaming in PvP.
So about 2002, I'm living in Louisville and I'm gaming with this really great D&D game master. We're just having a ball. It was one of my favorite games ever. And to sort of award this guy, some kind of memento of how awesome the game was, I bought him an official DM hat. Oh. Like in the Cold War.
Right.
And said, "Here is your trophy, sir. You have earned this."
Nice. Yeah, gosh. The DM hat and the Fez, gaming Fez too.
I haven't bought one of those, but I did love the GM hat because it was specifically for, the DM hat. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
God. Okay. So we're going to do a thing. We always bring on a guest. We talk to them about what's called their gaming character sheet.
Okay.
And this is just going to tell the listeners who may not know who you are a little bit about yourself and where they might know you from in terms of gaming, through the lens of a gaming character sheet, which I imagine you'll have no problem with. So Go ahead.
I'm just describing myself as if I were a D&D character?
However you want to do it.
Okay. Well, I am a human bard. Most definitely.
You are not an elf. Okay.
No, I'm quite human. I'm quite human in nature. I probably even could get away with saying half ogre or half orc. I'm a big guy, but yeah, I'm definitely a bard. I'd say charisma is my highest score. I'm 6'4", so I've got an above average strength, maybe around 15, 16, low dexterity. And I'll give myself an above average intelligence and an average wisdom. What am I missing? Constitution. I don't know. Average constitution. Around 12.
And you're also you have a specialty in creating web content.
Yeah, I have the new media feat. I also have ability to create artifacts out of any two ordinary objects. So you could bring me some wood and an old McDonald's fry container. I'll bring it to a convention, get George Takei to sign it, put it in a shadow box shaped like the Star Trek insignia. It's an artifact. You can eBay it.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah.
That's nice. For people who may not know, can you tell us what PvP is and what it's about?
Yeah. PvP, or player versus player, is the webcomic I've been drawing since 1998, drawing and writing it. It's not the same comic it was back then, but it's essentially, this is my elevator pitch, and I hate one part of it, but it's very accurate. It's The Office meets Big Bang Theory. There you go.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of Big Bang Theory, but it encapsulates it pretty well. It's geek office humor, very character driven, and pop culture driven, and it's a gag-a-day comic. And I've been drawing it. The schedule's been different, but 7 days a week for a while now. 5 days a week. I took my weekends back after the 10-year mark, and been doing it. For 16 years now.
You also have an achievement on your sheet that says professional D&D player.
Yeah, I'm very proud of that achievement. I am a professional D&D player.
Benwin Bronze Bottom.
That's almost not a compliment, because it seems I feel like it takes away a little bit from the pureness of it. But the good news is when we're up on stage, and yeah, I do get paid to do it, which is great. But when we're up on stage and we're playing D&D, it's some of the most fun I've ever had playing the game.
That really comes through. I think it does.
It's really funny because when we prepare for that, so for those of you that don't know, I am one of 3 regular players in a D&D game that's only played live at the PAX convention, PAX Prime, and more recently PAX East. But literally we prepare for it by doing nothing. We just show up that day and go. Perkins, I think, our DM to the stars, has to do the most work. We just show up and play D&D. We had toyed at the beginning with it being more theater than actually playing, and we kind of threw that out the window right away. So we are actually up there playing D&D. None of it's scripted. It's all on the off the cuff, and it's just a blast. It's just a blast. There's nothing like playing D&D in costume in front of 2,000 people. That's the way to. If you can, if you have the means, I highly recommend playing that way.
Well, very few people probably ever going to get that opportunity, but it's awesome that you are part of that select group.
Yes,
and we're just very grateful to have you join us here on the show to talk about that kind of thing, because getting guests like you on the show is going to be a big help for not only us as Gamers Tavern, but it also helps like the gamers out there get to know you guys a little bit better, right? Get to know what kind of gamers you are, things of that nature. So speaking of that, the next thing we do is we do what have we been playing lately? And I'm actually going to start with Daryl this time. Daryl, what you been playing lately?
A friend of mine who hasn't run a game since he was a teenager, this is James, the guy I gamed with pretty much my entire life, is running his first Pathfinder game in a long, long, long time. So I'm sitting here. I just finished editing our we just did a character optimization episode. And so I'm sitting here I'm basically making Locke Lamore as a rogue for his character, for his like urban based game. And it is so min-maxed and cheesy. I'm having to go. He's like, I didn't even know there were this many Pathfinder books.
Well, you're optimizing to meet a concept. And in this case, your concept is Locke Lamora from the book Lives of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch.
Yes.
Okay. So what have you been playing lately, Scott?
I've been playing in a 5th edition campaign.
Awesome.
Rodney Thompson, who works for Wizards of the Coast. I live up in Seattle, not too far from Renton, where Wizards of the Coast is located. And through all of my, business associations and stuff, and through Table Titans and stuff, I've gotten to know a lot of people at WotC. And a lot of the people that I know, the people in my circle of friends have employees of WotC's either running their games or in their games. It's weird. So there's an employee of Wizards of the Coast in pretty much every game that I'm conscious of up here in the Pacific Northwest. And luckily, I have Rodney Thompson DMing mine. So we get together every other week, and we're doing a 5th edition campaign. I'm playing a ranger named Erok Crowforth, and a bunch of my buddies and I there's about 6 of us in the game. Other game designers, Mike Selenker, who runs Lone Shark Games, is in there. And then Mike Faylauer from Penny Arcade and some of our buddies. So we're playing that. Most recently I've played Lords of Waterdeep. Nice. It's actually a game Rodney designed, now that I think about it. And I love that game. That game is so fun. Yeah, Lords of Waterdeep. And then there was a Ticket to Ride is a big one in the Kurtz household. Are you familiar with Ticket to Ride?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I am.
That's a big one. My dad grew up. My dad is a German immigrant, and he's big on trains, model trains his whole life. So we're a train-centric family, and Ticket to Ride is a big one.
Awesome. As for myself, I've been running a D&D 5th edition game set in the Birthright universe, which has a bunch of guys who've been on the show previously. We're enjoying that greatly. I am starting to think the 5th edition is possibly my favorite edition of D&D ever.
So good.
I just picked up the DMG, as a matter of fact. We started a board game the other day, which was Fortune and Glory, which is really interesting.
Oh, I love that game.
It is really cool. We didn't actually get through the whole game, so I'm really excited to play it all the way through, but I did like what we had played.
Yeah, I gotta say, I love Fortune and Glory, but it is a beast of a game. It'll take you an hour to set it up alone, but it is so worth it. Why don't you go ahead and tell them what it's about, the concept?
So, yeah, Fortune and Glory, the concept of Fortune and Glory is you were playing pulp adventurers, battling the mob or battling Nazis or battling those weird cults. and traveling across the world to rescue or acquire certain artifacts from trap-filled tombs that also have challenges like car chases and things of that nature. It's really action-packed and cool and very very emotive of the particular style that it's meant to be.
Yeah, it's like 20s, 30s pulp adventure, 20s, 30s, 40s, like the sort of thing that Indiana Jones was a pastiche of, those type of stories that were really popular back then. Rocketeer is another good example.
Yeah.
Something's in that show. Oh my God, it's so
Lastly,
great.
I'm in a Savage Worlds game that's being run by Corinne Seabolt, a friend of the show and one of my roommates. And Corinne is running this game called The Crew, which is a modern sort of supernatural hunter type game where you play different people who have different abilities who are tracking down monsters. I'm actually playing Diana Delacroix, who is the child of a normal human and the goddess Nike. So
Wow.
Yeah, winning is what I do, is one of her quotes. So anyway, that's what I've been up to. Let's jump into Tavern Tales. In Tavern Tales, we talk about a memorable die roll from a recent game. Scott, can you give us a great story about a memorable die roll?
Jeez, gosh. A memorable die roll. Holy crap. Wow. I don't know why that question threw me. I'm racking my brain trying to come up with something that's really awesome. No, I can't think of one.
Well,
I mean, there was, what's really funny is that during our live game one time, it was the first time Mike Krahulik had ever played D&D, and Jerry had been playing his whole life, and he could not roll anything over a 1 to save his life. I think he rolled like 4 ones in a row.
Ooh.
And Mike turned to him and said, "You are horrible at this game. You are terrible at D&D. How long have you been playing?" I mean, the guy just could not catch a break.
And I'm sitting here not trying to quote the next line, which is
Right. Yeah, don't quote
punch
it.
him in the dick.
Yeah,
that was
Wheaton's D punch.
Yeah, except, well,
Yeah.
Now,
but,
I will point out that there's this great T-shirt that you have that is your D&D character, and he's a dwarf. And what's his name? Your dwarf's character?
Binwin Bronzebottom.
And that guy is got arrows sticking out of him. He's on fire. You know, he's got like a bear trap on his arm. And the name on the shirt is him saying, "Guys, I found the trap."
Yeah, I found the trap. Yeah, in that first game we played, Binwin became the target for the mage. I was the place where he dropped all the offensive spells. So it just became a running gag that, and I tend with that character just to barge in. We don't have a rogue amongst us, although we have on 1 or 2 adventures we've had a bardish rogue type person. But normally I act as the rogue and I disarm all traps by springing them. So it's up to our cleric to make sure I survive that. I mean, that's the best way to disarm a trap is just spring it.
Binwin's not actually a rogue, right? Right? He's a fighter, isn't he?
He is he's a fighter.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't missed something there.
No. But I do. It is my job to disarm all traps. I just trip them.
Nice. You know, and that actually, talk about running gag. That's going to ease us right into our main topic tonight, which is about humor and gaming. You see how that segue worked right there?
That was a segue.
There
That
you
was
go.
smooth.
That was a segue.
I want to start us out by asking the guest about this particular question. What is the role of humor in a tabletop game?
Well, for me, it's everything because I got to tell you, I'm a very specific type of player. I care very little about the rules. I mean, I want the rules there, and they help make the character and the world more real. They're the physics of the fictional world we're all living in. So it's not 100% just make believe. You know, it's not a improv experiment. It's not a new fiction workshop. It is a game, and it does leave up some randomness. You know, the dice being, fate or God or however you want to put it. But for me, I'm not a big min-maxer. I'm not a big stat person. I would rather my character have be weaker and be flawed because that's the way I write characters. I think flawed characters are more interesting. So I'd rather not min-max. I'm going for the moments where in a year's time, 6 months to a year to 2 years time, it's going to be the moment where you say, remember that time we were playing and your ranger failed the shot, but it turned out we were aiming at the wrong guy. So it was a good thing that you didn't hit him. Or every group has this where it's like, yeah, and you brought the whole dungeon down on our heads and blah, 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 blah. And someone thought it'd be a good idea to shoot the roper, Those are the moments you're going for. I mean, that's the takeaway from the table. Humor is a huge part of that. And I have sat at some humorless tables, and I've sat at the table where there's one humorless guy, and no one likes that guy. If you don't have that guy or gal at your table, you might be that guy or gal. You should self-evaluate, make sure you're not that guy or gal.
Well, let's, just to be clear, I think there are many different ways to play a role-playing game, and all of them are valid. So, we're not telling you, if you don't have any humor in your game, you're doing it wrong. We're just saying,
we have a big min-maxer in our game, and he is he is the biggest min-maxer. He's got it all in his head. He knows exactly what ways to combine things. He's constantly challenging our DM, and our DM helped write the player's handbook. So, I mean, we have it in the group. That does not mean that we don't enjoy, playing with them. It's a different style of playing. But for me, the most important part is the story and the stories that we're telling. I'd rather fail something. I'd rather not have something be effective character and stat wise if it means we have a great story element we can all remember from the night.
Right. It's all about the experience is what you're telling us.
For me, yeah. I mean, for most people at the table, yes. But for some people, I mean, my brother is this way. My brother is looking for the moment where his character shines and pulls off something amazing. So for him to fail at something, he's going to be disappointed at the table.
I think what we're getting at is we're talking about takeaways. We're talking about the memorable moments, right? And sometimes the moment can be memorable because it's really funny. And sometimes, there's moments of memorable that is also drama, and there's moments of memorable that are also, great success against incredible odds. But definitely one of those things that we take away from and remember later is that really funny moment, right?
I agree. I tend to provide the comic relief at the table. That's just what I tend to bring. I like the funny moments. My ranger currently now has a very, very low charisma score. I think it's like a 5. And I attributed that to the fact that he has spent so much time living in the woods away from people that he's better with animals now than he is with people. So I'm constantly talking to people and forgetting and talking to them in bird or talking to them in deer. I'm doing that kind of stuff.
Ruff.
And,
oh, wait, sorry. 2 tankards of ale, please.
It's like asking Lilu what her name is in Fifth Element.
Yeah, exactly. That's I don't know. That stuff is just fun to me.
Well, I think at the base, what we're talking about, right, of having fun in a game, part of that fun factor is just, humorous. I mean, having humor in the game helps make the game fun in most circles, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another big deal is it's a tension breaker, right? Like if you have a big dramatic moment, or you have a big like, holy crap, we're gonna lose this fight against the dragon moment. Humor can actually get in there and for good and for ill, right? It can break that tension.
That's a big tool for any dramatic kind of storytelling. Joss Whedon said it recently.
Oh, he's a master of it.
Get serious, but then for God's sakes, tell a joke.
Oh yeah. The Avengers has just a beautiful moment with Iron Man. It's exactly that.
Yep.
And I agree that it's a wonderful thing to not always have the grimdark and to have moments where the tension breaks, because it allows you to build up back up with the drama and back up with the serious businesses at stake kind of a thing.
I think it's that kind of combination of drama and humor is what makes something from being drama to an action adventure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The difference between violence and action is, the difference between the movie Heat and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, I was going to say, like the difference between Death Wish and Die Hard. Right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly.
Is the humor.
Yep.
They're both action movies, but lots of people die in both of them. But one of those is clearly an action adventure, and one is clearly a lot darker. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so one other thing I wanted to mention in this particular section is there's some games that are just intentionally aimed at very serious tones. And I'm talking about your Vampire the Masquerade. I'm talking about your Help me out here, Daryl. What are some other games that are very serious?
Warhammer 40K, aside from the orcs, pretty much tends to go for that. It's a really grim, dark setting. Yeah. There's a lot of games out there that are Traveler
is intentionally very serious,
and they're all meant to have this real serious, real dark tone to it, to explore themes and tropes of humanity and how far you're going to push yourself. And there are some games that look like they were meant to be played that way that just usually aren't.
Well, that's I'm not saying you have to play them with injections of humor, but it does change. I think it can both improve and harm depending on how it's used. Those intentionally serious games to add humor to them.
You know what group of gamers I think are the most somber sourpusses I've ever seen standing around playing. And I haven't spent a lot of time with them, but I've never been in a game shop and seen them playing and not gone, boy, everyone is so serious and quiet over here. It's all the War Machine people. Everyone's playing. The miniature gamers? My gosh, yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, no, done. Look at my rule out. Yep, nope, that makes it. And that goes there and this goes here. Okay, everyone's moving it. It's just
a very competitive environment, Scott.
Yeah.
Trust me, I used to be a miniature gamer. I worked for Games Workshop for a number of years. So, it's when you get into a tournament, especially, it can be, you turn off everything except your tactical mindset because you're trying to win.
Yeah, but even Magic the Gathering players will still crack a joke here and there. It seems like
I've seen Magic guys do the same thing.
No, I think Magic is the same way.
In a lot of cases, but sometimes they seem a lot lighter to me that when people are playing it, a lot more joking.
Well, it depends who you're asking, right? Because like if you're talking about friends and family playing, definitely. But if you go to a game shop, everyone's got their game face on, right? Everyone's deck measuring.
Oh,
how'd you like that?
I see what you did there. I don't need binoculars to see what you did there.
Yeah, no, I think Magic can be the same way too. I think people get really, really serious about that stuff.
Scott, let me ask you this question. What makes a game, specifically a role-playing game, what makes a role-playing game a comedy or a humor-centric game?
Well, there are definitely games that have been designed to be a little more humor-oriented than others. I think it all comes down to the lore that's written around it. I know that I think one of the most fun kind of oddball humor-centric games that I saw recently was when WotC re-released Gamma World. There was no way to play that and not have a fun time.
And not laugh, I think you're right. Yeah,
I know.
You've got a chicken with two meat cleavers, an anthropomorphic chicken on the cover of the book.
It was like a role-playing game meets post-apocalyptic dystopian setting meets Mad Libs.
Right, so we're talking about the tone and sometimes how that tone is communicated through the artwork, right?
Yeah, but not even that. Just rolling characters was such a random thing. You know, you could be a mutant with a stop sign as a weapon. You could be a plant person with it just was so random.
Yeah, but
a ton of fun.
Random rolls do add a lot of humor if you're in the right mood, I think, for it. There's some really great games that have a lot of random rolls in them, though. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, if you use the Heroes of Legend central casting books for creating your characters, even going back to old games like Cyberpunk, the old interlock system with the life paths that you roll up, you can come up with some pretty bizarre. Oh God, I remember so many Marvel superhero characters that I rolled that were just crazy.
Yeah, gosh.
You remember Marvel superheroes?
Oh man, yeah. We had a running gag. My friend Rob Schiebel, who I grew up with in West Des Moines, Iowa, back in the 80s, we bought that box set. And all of the statistics for that had a word associated with it.
Monstrous. Amazing.
Yeah, monstrous.
Incredible.
But the worst was feeble. Right? And feeble intelligence was trouble with doors. That was the description. One time, my buddy and I, Rob Schiebel, we're going to the mall, and I pushed instead of pulled, on the door of the mall. I went to-tunk, and my friend Rob behind me went, trouble with doors.
Nice.
And it slayed me. Yeah, no, the Marvel superhero game was really cool. I also played Villains and Vigilantes.
Yeah.
Which has a lot of connections to the comic book industry. A lot of comic book guys kind of got started in that game. Jeff D. Bill Willingham.
Yeah. Yep. You owe me a Coke.
Yeah. So, oh God, V&V was such a fun game. And that had a lot of humor in it too. So
Well, just on the subject of random rolls, a friend of mine made a character for Marvel Superheroes, and he said, I'm playing Cyber Commando. I have all these cybernetic stuff built into me. We're like, all right, cool. And he rolls, he gets like incredible running speed. We're like, all right, that's cool. And he rolls and he gets incredible ability to see at long distance. He's got like telescopic vision. He's like, oh, cool. All right, I'm awesome. And next power he rolls is feeble flame generation. He says, okay, so I can see a woman lighting a cigarette from a mile away, and I can run up and light it for her first. I'm like, all right, well, that's a way to make that work for you there, Scott. But I don't know. His name was also Scott, so yeah.
I remember as a kid trying to play V&V with a friend who was new to role-playing games, and I was helping him roll up a character, and I was very into superheroes, I was very into the X-Men. I was trying to show him how cool the game was, and he rolled randomly and he got pet and as his power. And he goes, well, what's a pet? And I said, well, like Kitty Pryde has Lockheed, or Kazar has his Sabretooth. And he goes, okay, I want my pet to be a Smurf. And I said, if you're not going to take this seriously, I'm going home. And I packed everything up and left. Like, I was really upset that he wanted his superhero's pet to be a Smurf, because he had shrinking power. So he's going to ride on the back of a Smurf. And it's just like, I can't deal with this. Superheroes are very important to me, and you're not taking this seriously at all.
This is serious business.
Yeah. I wasn't very humor oriented back then.
Well, I think and this is something I want to get into a little bit later, but there is a way for humor to actually kind of harm the experience when it's used inappropriately. But just for a minute, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about, like, what makes a game, humorous, or what makes a comedy game. And we talked about the tone. We talked about the art. We actually talked a little bit about mechanics just now, right? Like the random rolls can really inject, for good or for ill, some humor into it. There's also games that are intentional parodies, right? Munchkin, great example. That is essentially a parody of all role-playing games ever.
Yeah. A lot of the Steve Jackson games tend to be that way. Isn't there another one called Shay Geek?
Yep.
Yeah. Then that's a parody of conventions, if I'm right.
No, it's like it's like kind of like dorm life. You're in your early 20s, being a nerd. Yeah. You can play. Okay. You're trying to earn slack, and you have a job, and your job gives you so much free time. And one of the activities can actually win you the game really quickly is playing role playing games, because it's a random amount of slack you earn.
I one time based an entire D&D adventure off of a Huey Lewis song when I was very young, and I'm not especially proud of this.
Wait, what?
Yeah. The Huey Lewis song Power of Love, I transformed into a artifact called the Flower of Love, which would curse you, if you picked it up, and it would transform you into either like a wasp or a robot. And, they found a prophecy about the Flower of Love, which would make one man beep and another man sting.
Oh my gosh!
Yes, I know. I am guilty as charged. Right? Well, I thought it was funny, but they didn't. And obviously, there you go. And I've been in another guy's group where he ran us through a dungeon that had these kind of very involved water levels, right, where there was a lot of like plumbing and things, and we eventually realized we were in a giant toilet. And sometimes
we've done that before. We've done things where this happened a lot in a friend's game, where halfway through the game, everyone playing goes, is this Pokemon? Are we doing Pokemon? Things like that.
Oh my God, this is the Pac-Man maze.
Right. Yeah. You incorporate that stuff in and wait for them to find it. It's a lot of fun.
It can be. It can go wrong, but it can also be good. And sometimes it's, we're talking about, I think we're now talking about more or less style, right? The style. There it can be a certain over the topness if you want to play. Like, I've seen people play Weapons of the Gods like Dragon Ball, which is awesome. I mean, they had a lot of fun with it. Yeah. And there was a friend of mine, and he wanted to run his D&D game like a Final Fantasy game. And we asked him just how far he wanted to go with this. And eventually what we decided is that we were actually, our characters, when we talked, our mouth would move, but there would actually be a screen showing our text, and you would have to hit the button to continue. And every time we hit a monster, you'd see their hit points over their head, that kind of a thing. We'd always do the dance when we beat a monster. Da, 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 da. It was a one shot. It was a one shot, but it was actually really fun and really funny to do it in that over the top as if it were a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, I know what you mean though by it can be taken too far. I think it's a balancing act, right? Because if it's all joking around, if you're never taking it seriously, it's going to take you out of the game. It's going to take you out of the experience. You want to feel like the world you're making is real. So,
yeah, I think. Well, this sounds like a good time to actually skip ahead and actually talk about that. If Daryl's okay with me,
okay,
jumping the show notes a little bit.
All right.
So the challenges to having humor in your game, right? Scott, you just mentioned one. What's another one that you could think of?
Biggest one for me is just clash of senses of humor in the group. Because if you've got one guy who really likes like smart wordplay or likes like situational jokes, and you got somebody who likes physical comedy, you like someone who just likes making references, and those three guys at the table, they're all going to be making themselves laugh, but not each other.
Yeah. If someone at the table loves puns, it's going to get old super fast.
And then,
guilty.
And then you got the one guy who showed up and he's just like, why can't you guys take this seriously?
Well, I think, part of
I've
it
got
is
an 18-page backstory for my character.
We're talking about making sure everybody is kind of okay with that style, right? Like, and this is harder when you're doing a game with strangers or you're doing a campaign for the first time because this is really kind of part of tone, isn't it?
Yeah, I think. Well, obviously you're going to understand your gaming group after you play with it for a while. You're going to get to know it. So you're gonna know what's appropriate and not appropriate, and what's a good level of humor to be incorporated. I think the biggest problem with humor in a game and joking around is that it can slow the game down, and it was a much bigger problem when 4th edition, because combat in 4th edition could already just get bogged down. But at some point, you've got to focus on the game and getting back to playing. And I think the biggest issue with cutting it up and making jokes is that it can really delay the game.
Well, it can derail, right? I mean, you can have people making progress, towards a goal. People can feel like they're actually, kind of doing something. And then if their joke is cracked at the wrong time,
the one guy makes a Princess Bride reference, and then the next half hour is gone as everyone quotes the movie. That's what I'm talking about,
right? And so instead of getting 2 encounters done that evening, it's 1 and kind of a half because
Now, I think some of this falls on the GM. I think it's like my friend Sean Fannin. He's a really good GM because he will kind of take charge. He's not afraid to just go, "Hey guys," and snap his fingers a few times. Let's all get, let's all focus here, right? He does it in a way that isn't disrespectful, but he does it in a way that is clearly like, "Hey, I'm here to provide you guys with an experience, and I want to get back to that," right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an unreasonable way to handle it. Scott, do you GM?
I do. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what do you do in this kind of situation?
It was a lot worse with 4th edition because what happened in 4th edition, there was a lot of time sinks in 4th edition. And the biggest one was that there were just so many options for players past a certain level.
Analysis
so many skills, so many different things they could do. So what I would do is I would give bonuses to rolls, a +2 to hit, if you were ready to go when your turn was up. And I take away, I guess with 5th edition, what I would do is give advantage. I always give advantage if they do great role playing. I give advantage on the roll, and I'll give them. I would start penalizing with in-game stuff. I'd give disadvantage on rolls because they're not concentrating. I'll say, "Oh, you're not concentrating, and neither is your character, as mine's elsewhere." And so he gets a disadvantage on this roll. Get them to focus on the game again. I mean, I was taught by my DM mentor, Jerry Holkins, that a DM has got to be in control of the table. Because I was having a hard time with people showing up on time, especially when we were playing up at the office and everyone worked in that same office. No one, since we're all there and you can just run into the break room, it was 6 became 6:30, 6:30 became 7. And I said to him one day, pretty soon it's going to be 7:30. That's a whole hour late. And he said, if they're not there by the time you told them they're supposed to be there, you start docking XP. That's your job as a DM. And I'm like,
hardcore, man.
I don't like being that kind of DM. And he goes, well, once play starts, you don't be that kind of DM. But you've got to control the table. You're a host,
So I've got to ask, when Jerry gets in that mode, do his eyes really start glowing red?
No, Jerry's not like that at all. Jerry's actually a very, very kind, sweet man. And everything he says is said in a tone where you're not sure if you should be taking him seriously or not.
Well, this is all about taking things seriously. I would love to get Tom Lommel and his character as the dungeon bastard to answer that question. What do you do, to keep the control of the game? Oh my God, I bet it would be great. Just like Scott was saying, your humor, and it can kind of add to this overall feeling of, it being casual. And that can be a problem, a hindrance if you're trying to start on time. What I always like to do as a GM is kind of set a period of time after we start, like 30 minutes, and just kind of leave that open for everybody to get it out of their system and talk about the latest movie and, hey, did you hear this joke? And once that 30 minutes is up, I'm like, okay, now we're going. Also, one thing we didn't talk about, well, we did briefly, but with style of humor, right? Not everybody is going to have the same approach. Now, this is based on, knowing your group really well. I mean, it's going to be harder in a convention or harder in a group where they're all strangers, but there's appropriate humor for different people. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. If you've got a guy at your table that likes making kind of off-color jokes, and people are uncomfortable with that, it's your job as a DM or a player to politely pull him aside and let him know. I mean, this is table etiquette. But yeah, I mean,
if he wants to make a joke about the Republican Party and somebody at your table is a, card-carrying, member
Democrat.
of GOP, right? Or something, whatever, this is a recipe for disaster potentially. Also, like too many references, right? Like if you have guys, we talked about Princess Bride, and Monty Python is like very infamous for this, right?
Oh, you want to talk about getting penalties on your own? Crack a Monty Python joke at my game. I dare you.
Because it builds on itself, right?
It's the easiest way to just, bam, the game's derailed. The game's derailed for half an hour because everyone's going to be quoting movies. It doesn't matter how many times you try to bring it back in, they're going to come up with another reference because there's just such a big body of work there. Right. And it can also get to the point where if you're using reference humor in a game, where you just get to a point where you have burned it out and it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, like if we talk to two characters who are obviously Sam and Dean from Supernatural, and then we have, a Batman type show up, and then we, fight Oddjob. And, in the hands of the right GM, that can be awesome. And I'm just saying. But typically that is not necessarily great.
There's a way to incorporate the spirit of those characters into a game without actually having it be that way. The most favorite NPCs of my gaming group, and he's made his way into Table Titans, my comic strip about D&D, is essentially the drow version of James Bond. His name's Simon Goodchild. And I just made this drow thief artificer, and he had gadgets like James Bond did, but they were artifice objects, and he just kind of showed up and was just way many levels above them, but he would toy with them. He was very suave and debonair, and everyone loved him. And someone at the end of it goes, he's kind of like the drow James Bond. And I was like, yeah, he kind of is. And everyone just thought that was so cool. We didn't make any James Bond jokes. We were making Moneypenny jokes. He didn't have the name, James Bond or whatever, I mean, there's ways to incorporate that. You can put Batman in your game without it being so obvious that it takes you out.
Yeah, it's about versatility, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can remember the time I realized that I had crossed that line hard. It was a game I was running. It was a 4th edition game of D&D. We've been playing for months and months. I've talked about it on the show, and I think I may have said this moment before one time on the show, but it was just the second it came out of my mouth, I cringed because I realized how far we had gone in the just everything having little names and references, because the group was called the Wild Stallions, and they had one of those banners that when you plant it, gives everyone bonuses, and when they plant it, they go, "We are the Wild Stallions." Plant the banner. It was funny, but it just kept snowballing to the point where the half vampire Avenger comes around the corner after they had killed her vampire mother, and said, I'm cringing right now trying to remember it, but she comes around the corner and says, "My name is Buffy D. Blade. You killed my father. Prepare to die."
Boo.
Yeah.
So what we're saying here is that it can just be so much that it actually drains the drama out of a dramatic moment.
There was no drama. There was no humor. There was just nothing but oh my God, I put those words together in that order.
So like a little goes a long way, I think, is what we're really kind of building towards, right?
I think that I think that the best place for humor and kind of a lighter attitude is at the beginning of your campaign, especially if you have new players. New players in any kind of a role-playing situation are terrified. They're terrified. They won't know how to role-play. They won't know what to say when it's their turn. They don't know their character 100%. So if you can kind of let them off the hook with humor, if you can help them understand their character better by basing them on some kind of pop culture reference, if you can give them an actor or a character in a popular culture thing to reference, it helps a lot. At least I've found as a DM.
That is a excellent point. And I'm really glad you brought that up because I think you just nailed it right on the head. Using humor to ease a new player into the game or to make it less intimidating is a really, really strong and good tool for a DM. And I back that 100%, what you just said.
Yeah, it's really helped. For some reason, especially, you know, one of the things that I found is that there's a lot of girls and women I know that grew up actually playing role-playing games, and it's not new to them. But I also have met a lot of wives who were introduced to role-playing by their husbands, and they're playing for the first time as adults. And they've been watching their husband play for a long time, and they've been coaxed to the table, and they are terrified. And that is a great place to use that tool, humor, joking.
Yeah, but I think in this case, we want to be really careful and not make fun of the player, right?
No, obviously not.
Keep the humor focused on the game and keep it, you know, like
when I mean humor, NPCs, I mean lighthearted.
Yeah, exactly, and not like aimed at any particular person.
Because I think that if you approach a new player like that with a very dramatic moment, you know, like the NPC's like, oh, so you want entrance into the castle? Well, give me one good reason, you know, blah, blah, blah. Well, now the pressure's on. You've set up this moment. They're not going to know the right thing to say. They're worried they're going to ruin the story that's being told, you know, or they're going to ruin things for the party. But if you keep it lighthearted, it's not as terrifying. It seems like there's more right answers.
Yeah, I think you got a very good point there.
Yeah.
What is the most important invention in all of mankind? Beer! Longtime listeners will know how much I love good alcohol, but when it comes to craft beers, there's so much out there it can be intimidating. What's the difference between a brown ale and an IPA? And why is there so much German, Hefeweizen, Bock, Dunkel? Where do you start? I'll tell you where. Craft Beer Club. For just $3 each, you'll get 3 bottles of 4 different beers right to your door every single month from independent craft brewers of the best quality. In just a short amount of time, you'll be snobbing up with the hipsters talking about nose and hops. But Daryl, I can get a 12-pack cheaper at the local store, you say. But can you get specialty regional small batch beers at that price with this much selection? I didn't think so. Besides, you know you'd spend twice that much at a bar for the same beers just to try them out. So go to gamerstavern.org/craftbeerclub and we'll start you out with your first shipment plus 3 free gifts. That's gamerstavern.org/craftbeerclub and start enjoying real beer.
And we're back with the Gamers Tavern podcast talking with Scott Kurtz about humor in gaming. And I wanted to quickly point out, Scott had mentioned just recently talking about humor in games, this character in a web comic of his called Table Titans. And Table Titans is a very specific tabletop game oriented webcomic that Scott's doing, and it's really wonderful. And if you don't know where it is, we will make sure and include that link in the show notes for you guys to check out.
Yes.
I love the characters, by the way. Table Titans is awesome.
Thank you. It is my passion project. Not that PvP wasn't. It's just that PvP had such auspicious beginnings. Table Titans was really something I set out to do, where PvP just kind of happened organically, unexpectedly, kind of. But yeah, it's been a blast.
I want to refocus this a little bit. We were talking about all the ways that humor is kind of a challenge in a game. Mm-hmm. What are some things that are good? I mean, how does humor bring something extra and fun to a game?
I'm sorry, how does humor bring extra fun stuff to a game?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It seems like an obvious question, but I think if we explore the negative aspects, we should also explore the positives.
I just think that, especially if executed as a tool by your dungeon master, I think it can give you a richer game. I think that a lot of DMs, especially when they start building campaign worlds on their own, I think that they get very serious about their lore. They get very serious about their world building, and that's great. I mean, world building is super important. But I think that you can squeeze all the fun out of something if you get too bogged down in it.
Oh,
and
that's a good point.
Keeping humor in there, I think, keeps it more fun and less bogged down in the world building stuff. I played a pickup game of D&D with some fans at Gen Con last year, not this year. Last year, they came by the booth, said, we'd love to play D&D with you. And I said, yeah, we have no plans. We'll play tonight. And this guy had this whole world built, and it was just so impressive. And he had this whole system, cast system. And it was just, I mean, the world building was great. And it was very much the lower class versus the upper class. And there was such a humor, such a fun aspect of that, kind of a punky rebellion part, that it really was the perfect complement to the world building, the very serious world building of this kind of dark place.
Oh, man. And, I give seminars on world building all the time at conventions and stuff like that. And this is something I'm going to have to add in. What you just said, I'm going to have to add that into my how to world build. Don't lose the fun. Remember some of the humorous things. That's a great point.
It's an important element. I mean, and it's a balancing act too, because if it's all humor, then there's no way to have any weight to it. But if it's all serious and it's just joyless, I mean, we've all met DMs that get lost in their world building and their IP. This is a good example of how I used humor to help. Last year, or this year at Gen Con, I was exhibiting with the good people at We Love Fine, WeLoveFine.com. They do all of our merchandise. We're one of their licensors, and none of them had ever played D&D. It was the first time playing. One of the guys, we all went and played at one of the hotel bars. We kind of commandeered a table over in the corner, and I handed out the pre-made character sheets, and I was describing their characters to them kind of whole cloth so that they didn't feel like they needed to come up with a background on the fly. And the wizard, the guy that played the wizard, we were making fun of him because he had already had way too much to drink. I told him that he had a magic item. He had a magic artifact on him. And he said, oh, really? They really excited him. Like, what does it do? Is it a weapon? I said, it's a flask that never ends. You're a bit of a drunk. And it set the whole tone for his character. Like, no problem. I'm the crazy wizard drunk. Like, and the whole night it was, who put the drunk in charge of fireballs? Right? Like, who put the alcoholic, the town drunk, in charge of the deadliest weapons of the night, right? So
I'm gonna magic missile all three of you.
Yeah, his magic missiles, I told him that if he drank from the flask, his magic missiles would be more potent, but they actually had a chance to miss. So it was up to him. And so that's where the humor works.
No, those are
great. Just some examples.
Daryl, do you have a story that you've been wanting to share with us?
I think that is one of the things that humor can bring, is when you ask someone to tell a story. When we do our Tavern Tales on here, 9 times out of 10, it's always a funny story of someone screwing up and laughing. But one of my favorite stories was involving a cursed item that our DM put into the game. He didn't expect for this to happen, but the person, and this was 2nd edition AD&D, one of my first games I'd ever played. And this was during the time when you pick up a magic item that's cursed, you cannot put it down, period, until you get the curse removed. Guess who picks it up? The 3'2" halfling is now walking around with a 2-handed sword.
Cursed berserking sword?
I don't know if it was berserking. It was just cursed. So he's sitting there dragging along a 7-foot long sword that's twice as big as him.
That's pretty funny.
And he cannot put it down. And he was really into the stealth burglary stuff. Can't really do that when you're dragging around steel that weighs more than you do.
There's a girl that played with us from Germany in my days in the army. And she was druid, and she had decided her animal companion was a squirrel. And she says, I shall name him Einheinchen. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like a cool fantasy name. And it wasn't until
what was it? Einheinchen?
Yeah, something like that. And 2 games later, she revealed that that's actually squirrel in German.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, you got me on that one. There's also like some kind of funny, just bits in games, especially D&D, like has the Wand of Wonder, right? Which has all the crazy, again, random, elements that can just be, either funny or distracting depending on how
I love the Wand of Wonder. I'm going to have to put this in the show notes. I've been teasing it for a long time. I'm going to have to put it up. I've got a 600 item one for 3.5 Pathfinder that I use. So it's got 600 different effects every single time you activate the wand it can do.
Now, I think humor's got a different role in like a campaign as opposed to a convention where you're doing a one-shot type game, right? Because in a one-shot, you have a little more freedom to just be, just to really, like we talked about the experience, just to have it, make sure everybody has fun. You don't really care about the dramatic moments quite so much, at least in my opinion, at a one-shot as you do everyone walking away from the table saying they had a good time.
Yeah, agreed.
So I tend to do a lot of comedic convention one-shots. Like I have a Venture Brothers game where you're all playing characters from the Venture Brothers show. We're going to be running a D&D game where you're all playing members of the D&D cartoon this year, fighting Venger and tracking down Uni. It's going to be awesome. And I have a friend of mine who runs a luchador game where, no shit, you are, El Santo and the Blue Demon and all those guys, fighting midgets and Dracula because luchadors. And it's awesome, but it's hilarious. It's awesome because it's hilarious, right?
My go-to for a fun one-shot is Minds of Madness. I believe, what was that the one that you worked on?
That was a lot of fun.
It's basically the Tomb of Horrors, but you're in on the joke from the beginning.
Yeah, it's totally crazy on purpose. And I was at PAX East during the first time that was played publicly. They didn't have enough DMs. They turned away about 500 people. Everybody wanted to play it. And every single table was doing it differently. Every single table was attacking that thing from a different way. Chris Perkins and I, who co-wrote the module with me, we were just amazed at how everyone had a different solution to a different problem in that dungeon. It's a lot of fun. That Minds of Madness is a ton of fun. That's a great one-shot module. Not to pat myself on the back.
So since we're actually talking about like specific things here, why don't we actually jump into like talking about some very famous comedic or humorous, intentionally tabletop games?
Paranoia.
Yeah, Paranoia is a good one.
Got to be Paranoia. Probably the granddaddy, that and Toon. I think Toon's probably the most historically important one. I think it's the first time that it really, put humor front and center. And that's a if I'm not mistaken, it's a Greg Kostikian special is Toon.
There was a lot of humor in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle role-playing game too.
There was, although we talked about this right before the show. But the funny thing is about TMNT is it's actually meant, like if you look at the game, it's meant to replicate the feel of the black and white comics, which were far more serious.
They were, but there was I felt like there was still a ton of
not that it's a joyless. Yeah, it's not that it's some joyless exercise in anthropomorphic vigilantism, which it's not. It has humor in it, but it's important to note that when you talk about the TMNT game, the role playing game, you shouldn't be thinking. Well, I mean, not necessarily should. The creators weren't thinking about the 1984 cartoon. They were thinking about the comics.
No, of course not.
The original Eastman and Laird comics. I just realized this. I don't know why I didn't put it in the show notes because I took it off the show notes because it was supposed to be serious, but that's just ended up that way. The comic was a parody. It was a parody of the grim and gritty comics that were coming out, like Watchmen and Dark Knight.
Well, it was. I mean, you could say it's a parody, but I would, I think in the long run, I mean, maybe it started that way.
Well,
right?
The original one was meant to be a parody of the creation of the Turtles. That was the same truck that hit Matt Murdock and turned him into Daredevil.
I get it. But I'm saying a couple of in-jokes aside. Yeah, I mean, this is a whole different discussion, but okay. a couple of in-jokes aside, TMNT is more than just a parody. It is kind of its own thing.
It's very tongue-in-cheek, though.
Yeah, I think parts of it are. I mean, again, if you read those black and white comics, it's pretty evident that they were trying to tell a very serious story with some tongue-in-cheek elements. I mean, I grant you that. But anyway, sorry guys. Whoops. Fanboy, TMNT fanboy right here. And just to be clear, you're not doing it wrong if you want to play like the 1984 cartoon. I'm sure that would be really fun in the right hands. What about Munchkin? Obviously, we talked about that. Kobolds Ate My Baby.
Yep.
Hackmaster.
Is it?
It's a parody.
It originally was. It grew into something that was a lot more serious and has a lot more depth to it.
But originally it was a very parodic. It was a parody of the ADD second edition. It based on, of course, Knights of the Dinner Table, which is its own humor, stab, if you will, which I love, by the way. Love Knights.
No,
of the
I'm
Dinner
not very familiar with the Hackmaster game itself. Did the Hackmaster game ever go beyond just kind of being a I don't want to say rip off, but you know what I mean? Like, was it ever more than just a reskinned second edition D&D?
Yes.
It has grown into, it's still based on a D20 style rule, but it's grown into a completely different rule set, kind of like the same way, Mutants and Masterminds is technically a D20 based system, but there's so much more going on to it. Yeah, and it's actually evolved even further than that.
Hackmaster's original incarnation was very much what you just said. It was a reskin of second edition. It is now in its newest edition of Hackmaster. It's kind of its own original.
And it's got its own lore and everything now, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, again, a lot of this comes from a comic, not unlike some of the stuff you did. It comes from Knights of the Dinner Table, which established its own, universe and continuity and things of that nature.
Right.
And then Brian Patterson's doing kind of the same thing right now with Carthoon. That was his setting that was referenced in D20 Monkey that he just finished up a Kickstarter on that's going to become an actual printed game made book that's edition neutral and system neutral, but
Teenagers from Outer Space is a very famous comedic game.
I forgot about that one.
Well, it was this again is one of those historically important RPGs because this is kind of back in the day, and it's well known that the guy in charge of Artel Saurian is Mike Pondsmith. That's it. Mike Pondsmith was in charge of Artel Saurian at the time, and he was well known in the industry for being kind of a sage. He foresaw the newest trends. Like he was the first guy to jump on the giant robot train. He was the first guy to jump on the cyberpunk train. He was also the first guy to do an anime themed game, which was Teenagers from Outer Space. And it's really, like I said, from a historical standpoint, like of our industry and our culture, that's what makes TFOS like a really interesting game is that it was one of the first to kind of grab onto that cultural movement.
I'm not familiar with that one.
I'm a nerd.
Yeah, that one was from like the early 80s, I think, wasn't it?
It is. And I have some friends who just adore it. So, it was one of those games that had like a stat for cool, right? Like, how cool are you? It was very social, not so. It didn't have like a deep and heavy mechanical system, right? It was more meant.
Was it Marvel Superheroes that had fame as an element, or was that V&V?
Probably.
Or was that Champions?
V&V probably had fame. I think Marvel had Karma.
That's what Marvel had.
Champions had Reputation, if I remember right.
Yeah.
So what are some other famous games that do big comedic elements?
There's one that I'd completely forgotten about until I was doing research for the show, which was XDM, Extreme Dungeon Mastery, which was Tracy and Curtis Hickman did that one. It was not that long ago, actually. I thought it was older than that. But it's kind of like an over-the-top... This is from the Wikipedia page. Purporting to be a secret society of extreme game players, this book both casts a satirical eye and offers practical advice on improving game design and play of role-playing games. And it's got its own system as well to it, so.
Was there ever a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy role-playing game?
No, but there was the Dallas role-playing game.
Oh, Christ.
I don't want to dwell on it, but there were several games that, are funny not because they're intended to be. And there's a lot of games that were tried to be funny, but in the wrong way. And I don't want to dwell on it, but yeah, there's a number of ones we can go back and look to in our history and go, wow, really? They made a game for that? Or wow, that game is really that cheesy.
Can't believe I forgot Lowlife, former guest Andy Hopp, his Savage World setting, which is it's kind of in that same style of just complete random wackiness that we were talking about with Gamma World. But, for God's sakes, the role-playing game has sentient Twinkies as a playable character race. Come on.
I've got to definitely recommend Made, the role-playing game. And it's an import from Japan. I don't know how else to say this, but you play maids, like anime-themed maids, competing for the affections of the master. And it sounds weird, but let me tell you, it is a blast for a one shot or even a short campaign in the right hands. It is pretty amazing.
I think that James Ernest's company, Cheap Ass Games, makes some of the best humor-based games like Unexploded Cow, and Kill Dr. Lucky.
But this poor man, why should we kill him? Didn't you have the characters from PvP play that, I think, at one point?
Unexploded Cow, definitely.
Yeah. So absolutely. That poor man. Why do we have to kill him? And then like 2 rounds later, die. Why won't that old bastard just die?
That's right. That was a strip I did, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's what I remember. Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Everyone remembers my, that's crazy.
And then there's a game
now you know I'm a true fan, right?
Yes.
Oh, and there was another game. This was, I want to say this was Jeff D did something called Twerps, the world's easiest role-playing system. And it was meant to be a parody of systems at that point. It was like late 80s, early 90s, I think is when it came out, where game systems were just getting more and more and more crunchy and complex. And the entire system was built around the fact you have one stat called strength. And you rolled it for everything. And it was it was like a $3 pamphlet pretty much. And it had like 15 source books that were also $3, like 16-page pamphlets.
You know, there's also Superpowers.
I remember Superpowers.
Yeah, and there's one about cows from the same guy. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But yeah, there's a game about cows. I forget what it's called. But those are
cows.
Those are definitely humor-based game.
It's called Cows.
There you go.
I don't think Kovalik is going to come on.
Doesn't seem like it.
Unfortunately, I think you're right.
I think he bailed on me.
Why here's a question. Why isn't there like a Munchkin role-playing game? Because it seems like it'd be, something you could do. If you can have Twerps, if you can have Toon.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work to put together a role-playing game. There's a lot of balancing involved.
If only Steve Jackson's games had a system in place that was built to be, generic and universal, that they could easily adapt the new source book to. If only.
Oh, man. I want to say also just, it doesn't have to be a comedic game at the start, right? It can be about the experience like we talked about. I actually ran a game of Dark Heresy, which is a very, very serious game on the surface, right? And I came prepared to this convention with a, deep investigation of the Inquisition, and there was, a cult, and it was going to be kind of a real dark, it was meant to be kind of a brooding type of game. But who should stand at my table but my good friend Robert Dorff, who we've had on the show before. And Robert Dorff is the guy who runs all the Luchador games. And Lee Garvin, who is the creator of Humorous Game, which is Tales from the Floating Vagabond. So I get Lee Garvin and Robert Dorff at my table. And let me tell you, it didn't take long for me to switch gears and say, you know what? This is not going to work as a dark and serious game. And I just rolled with the flow. And I said, okay, it's going to be a little more Laurel and Hardy meets the Inquisition and a little less grimdark. And we had a great time. I mean, that's really the goal, is we had a great time when it all comes to the end. But that's what brought to mind one other famous community game, of course, Tales from the Floating Vagabond, which is a really, really fun game.
I'm going to throw this out there, and you can correct me if you disagree. I'm going to say Call of Cthulhu is a humorous game.
Ooh.
It usually ends up getting played that way, whether it's meant to. I don't know if it's designed that way, but that's the way it gets played.
I don't know, man. I've seen it be played so many different ways. I mean, I don't know.
It always breaks down into something really dumb by the time it's over.
So what are some things about gaming that are humor that aren't games? I mean, why don't you tell us about Table Titans? That would be a good way to start us off here.
Table Titans is a long-form comic that I'm doing online that is about Val and her gaming group. Val is a young gamer. She is very, very serious about gaming. Story is very important to her and her gaming group and the campaign they play in. And the theme of the comic is really about the importance of story and how it can tie friends together, that kind of shared experience. So it's been going now for almost 2 years. We're on our what you would call our second season. We're just halfway through our second season. It's kind of something we've been doing in partnership with Wizards of the Coast. They let us play in their sandbox. Unlike Knights of the Dinner Table, we didn't make up our own game for them to play. We're just they're playing D&D. It's an option we were going to do because I was going to do the comic regardless. So in the meantime, as long as WotC is cool with it, they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, which is great because it lets us play with their toys and have things like Displacer Beasts and Blink Dogs and Beholders in the strip.
Which is, it is a very, very good strip. I really like it.
Thanks. We're really having a good time. And we had a Kickstarter at the end of last year to get the first book printed. It was a huge success, which just floored me because it's grown. The strip has grown in 2 years, almost to be as much traffic as PvP, which has been around for 16. So we're very blessed with it. Yeah. So it's just a really great, fun project to be working on, and it's all about gaming. It's all about storytelling, and there's a lot of humor in it.
Okay, I want to welcome to the show John Kovalik. John, thank you for joining us tonight.
It's my pleasure, and happy holidays to all.
Happy holidays to you, John. Now, for the listeners, John, of course, has a well-known webcomic called Dork Tower. And do you want to give us your brief overview of where people might know you from in the gaming industry?
The two biggies would be the game Apples to Apples, which I helped develop and illustrated, and I wrote all of the goddamn flavor text for. And the game Munchkin, which I have illustrated for about the last 12 years. And I've done over 5,000 Munchkin cards for that game system.
Oh my god!
I don't think you can compare those two things, John. If you see what I did there.
Yes. I drew one apple for one game and 5,000 cards for the other game.
You've drawn 5,000 Munchkin cards?
Yes, I have.
Oh my gosh!
It's over 5,000.
It kind of averages over the last 12 years. I guess it averages to a little less than one per day, but of course it comes in huge chunks. But yeah, and I've done over 100 other games, most of which are totally forgettable.
Well,
I never did anything.
We have talked about one of them already. Earlier in the episode, we talked about Kobolds Ate My Baby.
Which is not one of the forgettable ones. That's one of the delightful ones. And yeah, occasionally I get called in to make something really, really horrible and awful seem cute and lovable. And Kobolds Ate My Baby is one of those examples.
We just talked to Scott about Table Titans because we're kind of talking about things that are humorous about gaming that aren't actually games.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind telling the listeners what is Dork Tower?
Dork Tower is a comic strip about gamers that's been around for 17 years now, 18 years. It began running in the mid-90s. Called Shadus. And at the time, I created a website for it because back in the day, you didn't know how to do these things. That would have been like 1997 was the first time it went online. But it's basically a comic strip about 4 gamers. And they
Huzzah!
It must be mine. And they started out as pure role players, but since then it's kind of expanded to be just about every form of tabletop board gaming, miniatures, cards, everything. Occasionally console gaming, but I don't really have that much time to do that, so that doesn't really feature prominently.
Kickstarter does.
Kickstarter certainly does, yes. So yes, it's essentially it's a reflection of my life and my loves and my geekiness.
Well, it has a lot to say about games and the gaming industry, which is, part of the reason why we wanted to talk to you about it tonight. We were just discussing, the role of humor in games. And I think you can't really talk about humor in games without discussing things like Table Titans, Dork Tower, PvP, Knights of the Dinner Table, and Order of the Stick, I think, are also up there.
And there's so many others at the moment. It's huge.
There's a ton of them. I lost track of all the ones that I was trying.
D20 Monkey.
Oh yeah.
Full Frontal Nerdity.
Nodwick. Yeah.
Nodwick is one of the classics.
Of course. How could I forget Nodwick?
Brilliant. Were Geek, Goblins, there's so many. I mean, there are literally hundreds at the moment. And when I started, it was Dork Tower, Knights of the Dinner Table, and What's New by the Folios.
Phil and Dixie, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. I owe Goblins for introducing me to Pat Rothfuss and The Name of the Wind. I would not have read that book if it wasn't for Goblins.
Wow.
No, for real. Like they were promoting it before anybody else.
Yeah, yeah. And
is he still working on that comic?
He is. It's in a hiatus at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's everything I hear is that it's coming back, and he just wants to get everything tidied up.
Now, why do you think as gamers we really enjoy and love to see these really humorous approaches to our hobby?
Well, I mean, gaming is so full of humor anyway. I mean, to me, one of the funniest role-playing games I've ever played is Call of Cthulhu.
We were just talking about that.
So much humor comes out of Call of Cthulhu. I mean, the fact that you see all these cute little over the place anymore, and it's supposedly this absolutely horrific, 1920s, mind-blowing, horrible game. I mean, gaming just lends itself to humor. I mean, the games themselves may be serious or may try to be serious, but when you're around a gaming table, things happen and the table cracks up, and it'll just be joke after joke happening in these horrible, horrible situations.
Let's be clear, though. Call of Cthulhu is a horror game, not a horrible game.
No, that's true. Call of Cthulhu is, to my mind, the most elegant role-playing game for its time ever created. It's just beautiful and brilliant, and I adore it. I think it's just one of the all-time classics. And after I got into D&D, and then sort of got out of D&D, got into Traveller, and after Traveller, Call of Cthulhu was my thing. It's just brilliant. And in fact, anybody who loves Cthulhu, I really highly recommend they go and pick up Kenneth Height's Trail of Cthulhu game, which is Cthulhu with sort of streamlined rules for the 21st century. Just a wonderful game system. But yeah, it's like so much humor pops out of around a gaming table. No matter if it's a board game or a card game or a role-playing game or a video game. That you just can't. I mean, I would hate to play in a game that was so completely serious that did not have laughter at some level, no matter how terrifying the scenario was.
I think as a gamer, I love reading about other people playing games and the characters of your comic or characters of Knights of the Dinner Table or things of that nature. I love that because it gives me another window into the hobby that I love, and it always. For me, I find things to take away from that. Not only the jokes, but also sometimes the actual lessons of, the complex social interactions that occur at a table.
Yes. Me too. Well, I mean, one of the fun things for me with Dork Tower is the character Igor. I mean, most of the characters are kind of based on me to some extent, but Igor is based totally on my friend Scott, who is absolutely crazy and he's insane. And he's one of these.
Not Scott.
I was about to say
no.
Igor Scott.
Igor Scott. Yes,
okay.
Scott Ullman, my good friend Scott Ullman, who was in my first role-playing group here in Madison, and quite frankly. He is insane when it comes to role-playing. He will do insane things. And this is the point where the rest of the group rolls their eyes and goes, oh God, Scott's going to kill us again. And so the character Igor is somebody who I would never, ever be in real life around a gaming table. But it's so fun getting this out of my system. It's like, oh my God, this insane gamer is just going to take the entire party down with him.
Well, isn't that kind of one of the things about role-playing is we do it because it's something we don't get to do in real life. And sometimes the things we don't get to do in real life are the wild and crazy, just, off-the-wall ideas, right?
Absolutely. And, but some people do take that to a certain extreme. And it's funny because after Dork Tower started getting out there, I had a lot of people come up to me and tell me that they had an Igor in their group. And my initial reaction was, oh my God, there's more than one. God help us all.
That is funny.
I still remember that Gen Con in 2001 where Scott was at our booth. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience.
I have a lot of Francis's at my gaming table, actually.
Was that the last Gen Con that they were in Wisconsin?
Might have been. Oh, boy. But yes, one of the fun things about Scott Allman was he came with me to an Origins once, and he drove from Madison to Origins. And I was like white-knuckling it the entire drive because he drives like he role-plays. He is intense. He is insane. And the fact that we made it back alive was incredible. But he does have this wonderful, larger-than-life personality. And so he would be signing Dork Towers along with me at the convention. And you never want to let him sign first because, seriously, he would do his signature on a Dork Tower, and I would get the comics like, Scott, you didn't leave any place for me to sign.
There's some other things that have come recently into the industry as far as humor. A lot of films and web series and things of that nature. Have you guys heard of Dark Dungeons?
Oh,
yes.
My gosh. Yes.
It's amazing. And there's the gamers, of course.
Gamers.
Those guys are up here. They're so great.
You're in Seattle now, right?
I am, yeah. And they're kind of
Seattle.
I know.
It's so
Seattle
cool.
or Portland. It's just where everyone in comics ended up.
Oh man.
And gaming. Phil Lacefield's up here.
No way. Not the Phil Lacefield.
Yeah, he's off Lummi. He's in Lummi Island. He's a couple hours away, but he's up here in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Well, there's like a secondary vortex happening in Colorado with quite a few game designers kind of moving into that area as well. So
I'm sitting here in Madison in the snow, just listening to these stories.
Have you guys heard of the show called Standard Action?
I have not.
That's
Daryl, can you tell us about Standard Action?
Yeah, Standard Action is Joanna Gaskell and Rob Hunt put that one together. It's a web series that takes place. It's inside a D&D game, pretty much, where the characters. It's all in world. There's not like the gamers where they use the table as a framing device, but it's definitely set in a game world, and it is absolutely hilarious because it's I can't even get into it. There's lots of jokes, lots of references, but it doesn't overload you. But it is just hilarious, and it's brilliantly written. If you have not seen it yet, definitely check that out. It is great.
Have you guys heard of the series Bored with Life?
I have not.
It's a wonderful series. It's about board gaming and board gamers and this group of board gamers. And it's done by these professional actors who are actually board gamers themselves. There's a show on TV called The League, which is about,
so great. I love that show.
This is kind of like the board gaming equivalent of The League, and it's wonderful. It's called Bored with Life. The first series was 6 episodes, and it just got better and better. The characters are really getting well developed, and they just kickstarted a second series, and so that should be coming out soon. I did the cover for their DVD for the first series, but yeah, it's like all of this stuff is out there. I mean, it's not just, 10, 15 years ago, comics was all you could do, or the occasional article which might go viral about a gazebo or something like that.
If only Jolly were here to talk to us about the gazebo.
That's such a great bit.
There's YouTube bits too. Like you can find Patton Oswalt doing the live action role player meeting the cops. Right?
Well, here's the thing. 15. Actually, this was 10 years ago. I did a series in Dork Tower called The League of Extraordinary General Gamers, and it was the fact that, oh my God, Vin Diesel is a gamer.
Yeah.
I remember that.
And so, it's like Will Wheaton, Vin Diesel, Kurt Schilling, and Robin Williams. These were like the only 4 quote unquote celebrities. I mean, okay, they're celebrities, but these were the ones who were out, and everybody was glomming on for this. It's like, holy shit. I could not do that strip anymore these days. The tabletop show itself, gaming is so mainstream. It has moved so far beyond what it was 15, 17 years ago when Dork Tower started out. And because the base is so much wider and so much broader, and because people know the touchstones, the basic gaming touchstones, it's possible for Patton Oswalt to get out there and do an extraordinarily geeky set, and people will be doubled over and laughing.
Yeah.
Chris Hardwick came to Madison He did a couple of sold out shows at the Comedy Club, and everybody was totally, grokking on the geeky references, and it was brilliant. Before, gaming humor was very much an introverted kind of, hey, I get the joke. Do you get the joke? It's a really funny joke. Let's share this and be really funny and cool. Now it's everywhere. It's everything. It is so mainstream. It is so goddamn mainstream. That's wonderful. It's brilliant. It's amazing. And, the humor is just pushed in all of these many different directions. I mean, the fact that, the Big Bang Theory is, it's a little, I mean, some people love it. Some people essentially think it's Amos and Andy for geeks. But the fact that it even exists is, saying something about
not just exists. It is the top rated scripted comedy show on television right now.
Yes. So that just says something about, what used to be this tiny little hobby of ours.
I want to just quickly point out there's a great novel I read recently called Critical Failures. It is a little indie novel by a guy called named Robert Bevan, and it's great. It's actually it's basically taking the premise of Joel Rosenberg's great novel, The Sleeping Dragon, and taking that and applying it in a much more humorous and modern way. So you have a bunch of gamers who are meeting a GM for the first time, and the GM is, of course, wanting to run a very serious game, and they're all, cracking jokes and being drunken clowns, basically. And the GM decides to teach them the lesson, and with his magical dice, he sends them into the game world as their characters, and they get to experience what it's like to live in a world that has rules like, well, you have a 6 charisma. That means that nobody likes you ever. Right? It's actually really funny. And I think the second novel's, I'm reading the second novel now. It's getting a lot more serious and interesting. But at the same time, as far as a humorous take on gaming goes, it's a great novel. And I just wanted to point it out really quick.
Well, one thing, I mean, Munchkin, for example, just got into Target. And I'm sorry, not Target. Munchkin got into Walmart.
I saw it at Walmart the other day.
Yes, Walmart. And Munchkin is essentially one giant gaming in-joke. And the fact that it can go into the mass market unapologetically and people get the jokes, I mean, that's absolutely stunning.
Well, it's an interesting historical bit in our industry as well, because you have Steve Jackson Games, which was founded on role-playing games. And now Steve Jackson. Actually,
well, it was kind of the micro games as well. I mean, it was
absolutely. Absolutely. But one of the micro games, of course, being a role-playing
game. Fantasy Trip.
The Fantasy Trip, designed by Steve Jackson. So, so it was founded on role-playing games, and it existed for a long time as a role-playing game. Its identity is both the ogre guy and the Car Wars guy, but also the GURPS guy. But now the identity of Steve Jackson, it has been for the last 10 years, is pretty much the Munchkin guy, right? It's like it is now a company that produces a parody of role-playing games. That's what it does. I think that's interesting from a historical standpoint. There's nothing wrong with Munchkin. Munchkin's a great game, but I think it's just an interesting side view if you look at the history of our industry and look at how different companies evolve, right?
Speaking of mainstream, the 7th expansion of Munchkin was a flash deal on Amazon on Black Friday.
Awesome. Good for you, John. You got to be just on top of the world right now.
It's a ton of fun. I mean, Munchkin it's so fun to work in it, and it's made me a better cartoonist. I try to put my best work in on it, but it's kind of incredible. It's a really fun ride. And, honestly, I'm just so amazingly, stupidly fortunate. I've been able to work on essentially 2 once-in-a-lifetime games, Apples to Apples and Munchkin. So there's not really much more I can ask for.
Well, I bet you've got at least another one in you somewhere.
I keep trying. This is the fun part of the job.
All right. Listen, we're getting close to the last call here at the tavern, so I'm going to ask our guests to give us their final thoughts on humor and gaming. And you guys take as much time as you want, but I'm really curious to hear, what it all boils down to for Scott Kurtz and for John Kovalik.
I guess my final thoughts are the same as my first thoughts. I think it's my phone is beeping up, so just cut that and just take that out. Is the
Enterprise calling you?
Just take that out. Yes, I am getting a call from the Enterprise. I think it's a necessary. I think it's woven into the fabric of gaming. I don't think you can get a group of friends together at a table without humor occurring naturally. I think it's weaved into the DNA of gaming.
Oh yeah,
and I also
great. Can I quote you on that?
Sure.
That is badass.
I also think it's an important tool to help bring people into gaming, because I think that especially when it comes to role-playing games, a lot of newcomers, and as pop culture, as geek culture becomes pop culture more and more, which is happening, it's all melding together. More people are going to be coming into gaming. I think humor is a really important tool in the DM's toolbox to help new players feel more comfortable about not making a mistake. It keeps the stakes lower. It keeps the environment lighter, and it keeps things more fun. So it's a part of gaming that's kind of inescapable. And yes, it can be disruptive. It can slow a game down, but I wouldn't want to game without it. I think we've all had those experiences, and they're not great.
All right, John.
Yeah, I've got to echo what Scott says. I would not want to game if there was no humor. And I'm not saying the whole thing's got to be hilarious, but there has to be. It's like a moment of levity, which makes a moment of horror seem more horrific when it happens in a game. But for the most part, what I remember from the great games I've played in the past, with friends, games, board games, card games, is the laughter that's come out of them. I don't remember if I've won or lost. Okay, some of them I lost, and I remember those, and they hurt badly. But the laughter, I would much rather play a hugely fun game that I end up losing than a real serious game that I win in the end. I mean, there's just no comparison for me. I game because it's fun. I game because I want friends around me. I game because it's an escape from the world, and laughter and humor is a huge part of that experience for me.
Awesome. That's a great one. Daryl, do you have any final thoughts on it?
Pretty much just restating what the other two gentlemen said. It's a game. It's supposed to be fun. What's more fun than being funny? You're sitting around a table, laughing with your friends, and having a good time. That's what this is all about.
And I think I'm going
to... It's funny. If it breaks, it's not funny.
I don't want to be the Debbie Downer here, but I always like to say that there are many different types of fun, and no one particular style is going to be true for every group and every table. So I do want to make a statement that I think that there are some times where a serious game, it's important to have that serious bits in there. And it's important to remember that that's, a big part of a fun, dramatic story. It's important to remember that being serious is at times even critical to an epic verisimilitude or an immersion in a particular type of world or genre. But having said that, I echo what John and Scott said, that, I love having fun at the table. I love being funny at the table. I love having great stories to tell later about funny stuff that happened at the table. And I guess my only caution is, realize that humor is great, but a little goes a long way, and too much can be just as bad as too little. So I think that's pretty much where I'm at. Did I say anything there you guys disagree with? I'm just curious.
Not really.
No. I mean, it's like any form of theater. There's a point where the dramatic tension needs to increase, and a good, games master will be able to shepherd the group towards that point. And boy, when the bard's head is on the cutting block, a pun is probably not the best thing to throw out at that point.
Well, it depends on the group, depends on the game. But yeah, I think.
Let's be serious. It's a bard. Nobody cares.
Oh.
Exactly. Well, no, because what's going to happen. The bard's going to be the one to make the pun, and the rest of the table is going to be, just take his head.
Please get rid of that guy. Okay, so John, can you tell us what your latest thing is and where we can find out more about you and Dork Tower and Munchkin on the web?
Well, Dork Tower is at dorktower.com. I'm gearing up actually right now for the entire month of December. Dork Covenant, the first Dork Tower trade paperback, the entire collection is available for free And this is because we're leading up to a really big announcement that's going to come in a couple of weeks.
Woo!
So, free Dork Covenant.
Huzzah!
Huzzah! It must be mine. Munchkin. All the Munchkin news can be found at worldofmunchkin.com. And
how many W's are in that?
WWW. So technically that's 6 U's. But the new January, which is this wonderful party game I've been working on with some friends called Double Feature, which is, I think it's just an incredible movie game.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this so much.
Really excited about it. It should be out really soon, and I cannot wait for this to be out.
I can't wait either. It sounds pretty awesome. Scott, what's the newest thing? What's the newest thing from the Kurtz Labs, and where can we find out more about your creations?
Well, you can head to tabletitans.com or pvponline.com for my webcomics. PvP Online is more of a hub for everything, so if you're going to pick one, probably choose that. Table Titans, the book, will be coming out in the spring. It got pushed. Yeah, it got pushed because Steve Hamaker, who colored all of Jeff Smith's opus Bone, who came on as our colorist for season 2, he went back and recolored all of season 1 for the book.
Wow.
So we decided to bump the book to spring instead of having it out for Christmas so that Steve could recolor the whole thing. He decided he was going to take it on, and he pulled it off.
Are there character sheets in it?
Are there character sheets in it? Actually, the book is going to, part of the Kickstarter reward of the book was that we took the first season of Table Titans and turned it into a campaign setting.
Oh, sweet.
So the adventure the Titans go through is an adventure that comes with the book, and then there are side quests and stories and adventure hooks.
Are you writing this book?
No, we hired, oh man, the name is His name's Jeff. He does a lot of stuff for WotC stuff now. In the sense that it's inspired by the first, Jeffrey Ludwig is writing it.
Okay.
So, yeah, that was going to be a part of the book, but we decided to spin it off into its own book. So that's going to be available as well. One of the Kickstarter rewards was a vinyl figure of the main character, Val, and that has been made available for pre-order to people who didn't get a chance to back at that level. Anyone who's run a Kickstarter knows at some point people start asking you for add-ons. Like, can I just buy this one thing, but I don't want to back at that level? That's so impossible to do. So we just put the vinyl on pre-order for people who wanted it and didn't get a chance to back at that level. So you can get that at welovefine.com now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. On behalf of Daryl and myself, I want to say we're very grateful for you two guys to come on the show and talk to us about a subject you were obviously so expert at. I am just, one of the great things about being a host on this podcast is that Daryl basically lets me, geek out and fanboy over people I am, a big fan of. And I'm a huge fan of both Dork Tower and PvP, and have been for years and years and years. I told Scott earlier, I've been reading his comics since, 1997 or so. And the same is true for Dork Tower. I've been reading it an awful long time.
Isn't that like a blessing and a curse at the same time, John, when people are like, oh, I started reading your comic when I was 10. And
it's the worst thing. It's even worse is that when you get the kids coming up saying, my dad used to read your comic. And
oh, my God.
I've actually, I've got adults coming up saying, you spoke to my class when I was in high school. It's like, you're all grown up now. Stop.
I own a physical copy of Dork Covenant, for example, and I have a long run of PvP from the Image Comics when they were doing.
Gosh.
So
John was instrumental, and I say this all the time. John and Aaron and Liz Fuldo were instrumental in my breaking into comics. PvP got its big push. Its first big push because John got my comic into gaming shops. And it was no kidding. It was if John Kowalik says I should carry it, I'll carry it. So when you're a brand new indie comic and you can increase the number of stores that pick up your book by almost double because now gaming stores are willing to stock it, that's huge. I'm indebted to John for for forever. And Aaron and Liz too. It was just great for them to take me under their wing.
Then it's like, if we're going to be the Mutual Admiration Society here, I mean, it's just the best. It's, PvP is brilliant. It's everything you would want to be for a gaming comic. I mean, it's so well written. It's so well drawn. Scott is hilarious. It's what everybody else should be aspiring to. I mean, it's just, Dorkstorm Press regardless. It's like this, it would have been huge one way or the other. It's just,
yeah, well, that's kind of neat to say.
Greatest comics out there, and I sincerely believe Scott is the finest cartoonist of his generation.
Oh,
wow. You heard it here first,
John.
folks.
Well, since John said that, let me say.
The gauntlet's been thrown.
Yeah. One time, I had cancer, and John gave me his urine, and his urine cured my cancer. I just that to be said. John's urine will cure cancer.
Okay, that is the subtitle of this episode.
Can I use that as a pull quote on the new trade?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Every time you say your daughter, anytime you just mention your daughter, you have something to do, I can't stop smiling, man. I'm still so happy for you. My brother finally adopted, so I've got a 2-year-old niece showing up for Christmas this year.
Oh my God, that's so great!
Oh man, little girls, man, they just start breaking your heart immediately.
I know.
I'm not even her daddy, and she's breaking my heart.
Man. Louisa came in and told me she had a crush on a boy in her school, and I'm like, no, not until you're 12. Stop this. Stop. It's the best. Right. I mean, it really is the best.
Unfortunately, the Imperial Guard is about to shut us down for the night,
right.
So we're gonna have to close the doors of the tavern. But again, on behalf of Daryl and myself, thank you guys so much, and for all the listeners, until next time, may all your hits be crits.
Finding the correct contact lenses and the perfect frames for the fashionably nerdtastic can be a hassle in the big box stores, so that's why I use AC Lens. From the most fashionable frames and hard-to-find prescription contact lenses to the perfect contacts for your next cosplay, AC Lens has all the bases covered at your fingertips without the hassle of leaving the game table. Just go to gamerstavern.org/AC Lens, LENS. They have amazing offers, including up to $300 in savings for a year's supply of contact lenses, and with a 100% satisfaction guarantee, what's not to like? There's even a special deal for Gamers Tavern listeners, $5 off any contact lens order of $50 or more. They have everything you need to keep your eyes healthy and happy. So check out gamerstavern.org/AC Lens today for all your eye care needs.